think there's such an opportunity for the people that have been there for the last 10 or 20 years to document the current processes, like document the risks. All of that knowledge is what AI is going to need to really, to really be successful, to be part of the solution, right?
Jason Edelman, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
I got so actually I was really looking forward to this. All day, because like we're going to talk about network automation, which is kind of near and dear to like your heart. And for me, I think it's a super important component that we've been kind of banging on that door for a long time in the industry. And I'm getting the feeling that we're getting really close to at least being on the path towards like an agentic operations center, and we can kind of talk about that, a little bit. So, anyway, how you doing?
Good, 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 good. Yeah, really good. Glad to be on. And I was looking back at some of my emails just to call out. I remember joining some of the early ONUGs in 2013. So I think it's fair to say we probably both thought things would be faster along in the industry. But yeah, glad to be here.
Yes and no. Like I thought, like the stuff that we did in those early days, or in SD-WAN, I thought really took off, faster than I thought it would, and the multi-cloud stuff was slow. It was so crazy. We were talking multi-cloud, that was probably like 2014, 2015. And I cannot tell you some of the folks who I would respect their CEOs of really large companies, now that they're like, there's no multi-cloud market. It's just Amazon,
Hmm.
everyone's just going to really do Amazon, and that was the prevalent thinking. So it took a long time for really multi-cloud to kind of materialize. But I think the AI piece is a little bit different. The uptake and interest anyway is really there, and I think in the operations space, and especially in your space,
Hmm.
it's really there. But anyway, I thought like so Jason, I've known you for a long time. We haven't interacted a lot during that time frame, so that's also one of the main reasons I was just really excited for this. I find like I know a lot of people in the industry, but I don't really get to know them until they're on the
Hmm.
podcast. It's a crazy thing. Like, we'll meet each other, and we'll exchange, pleasantries and maybe talk a little bit, maybe have a meeting, on some particular topic. And then that relationship is reinforced on social and emails, but you really don't get to know the person. I find I get to do that here. So I think let's start with this. One of the main reasons why we've been doing these podcasts is to let everyone meet the thought leaders and get to know them better. So why don't you give a little bit of kind of tell your story around your career journey, the things you've done, and what kind of brought you to Network to Code, and then we'll talk about Network to Code after that. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, my background is very much coming from the traditional networking background. I got into networking probably in about the year 2000. It pains me to say that now, but basically I spent probably the better portion of 11, 12, 13 years in what I would now call the traditional networking. Was a network engineer, worked for Cisco, worked for a large VAR, doing routing, switching, security, wireless, and then really in that 2012 timeframe is when we saw that boom, right, with SDN, OpenFlow, a lot of the
Yeah.
venture-backed startups emerge. And
Yeah.
for me personally, back then, I always say kind of getting a feel for what the DevOps space was already doing with systems and applications. I was a part of some of the early trials with Cisco 1PK, saw some interesting things with Ansible and Puppet on networks from like Arista and Juniper back
Mm.
then. And yeah, I just saw the space, and I felt like there was like the biggest Cisco ACI versus VMware NSX. Everyone was sort of getting caught up in a lot
Yeah.
of that, that hype, And a lot of that movement is what motivated me to go start Network to Code, to operationalize networks and really focus on like the day two portion. I had a career in day one on architecture and design, and it was just who's thinking about day two, right? And that
Yeah.
was really kind
Mm.
of like the vision to go out and start Network to Code. And now I would say we're probably in our fourth phase of the business. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but yeah, we're just trying to help enterprises adopt and scale network automation.
Yeah. I tell you, you have such a great community around the company and the product. Stronger community than I've seen with lots of other companies, as well. Kind of tell me, like, what's the business plan around Network to Code? And obviously, you guys do network automation and you try to apply DevOps kind of techniques towards networking. But I don't want to speak for you. Once you give us, some background on Network to Code.
Yeah. I'll start with the community. Yeah, even from the early years, I think from 2014 is when the company was founded. From 2014, 2015, there were some early decisions around growing community, right? And that's everything from open source code to doing things on YouTube to speaking at conferences. And it
Mhm.
was just really due to the and even starting a Slack workspace that now has tens of thousands of people, but there was no other outlet, right, to be able to share and collaborate, and that really you know really became the growth engine for the business because we just met so many people that had the need in their environment. But I would say for Network to Code, yeah, as I alluded to, we're probably what I would say in our fourth phase of the business today. And it's great to maybe even say that here because there's different perceptions of kind of where we've been and where we're going or where we are today. But in the early years, we were doing a lot of training, right? And we,
Mhm.
we built probably some of the first training classes that existed around like the broad skills like Python, Ansible, and things like that. The training really dovetailed into being really well known for open source, right?
Mhm.
And I would say we became really, really well known for open source services to help enterprises adopt new skills and adopt network automation, large enterprises, multi-year contracts. And then another pivot point for us came in 2021 when we launched Nautilbot. And so for the past couple of
Right.
years,
Yep.
yeah, Source of Truth automation platform. We're in that third phase or first phase of Nautilbot. It was really about uh, services and driving using services to help our enterprise customers. And then in the latest phase, it really is combining the prior three, but with the goal to continue to commercialize right software and Autobot as we grow. Like we see the gaps in the tools in the market, and so we want to combine the best of open source, the best of services with commercial software, right? As we go forward.
Yeah. That's such a great story because, like, um, starting with a community, very similar to like the Onug story, right? We've been, we don't develop product, but we learn so much from the community, and I think the community gets so much for being engaged, as well. And it's not too many companies really kind of value that relationship, that you have, or either to convene people together, which you did around training. Well, we do it around kind of ideas and best practices, and there is training this year. Like, you guys are also participating in workshops on our day zero on October 21st,
Mm-hmm.
which we're super excited about. There's a huge need in the marketplace. We just hope it all, that people kind of find their way, to come on in and kind of take advantage of these classes. Well, but anyway, so your journey, really from training, then to like kind of leveraging the DevOps tools around Puppet and Ansible and others, around kind of networking, and then your Autobot won Best of Show. I think last was it in Dallas or was it in New York? I think it was in Dallas. So it's like the community really kind of rallied around that implementation. And now in your fourth phase. So what's your fourth phase really focused on?
Yeah, the fourth phase I was alluding to is really looking at like the past couple years as the growth in Nautilbot in the open source space, and I would say as a business, like the change is really in the business going forward around commercializing software along with services. So we'll
Mm,
continue to invest in the community, or as I said, for the past 10, 11 years, rooted in community. But the change really is like looking at the gaps that we still see in the market. At the end of the day, right? I think any good, long-standing open source project needs a way to continue to self-fund, and
yeah.
we want to continue to grow, to grow our customer base. And we believe the best path forward is to do that through both software and services, right, with our customers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super. So I have a graphic I want to show you. All right.
Hmm.
So this is going to be part of kind of my opening. And let me see if I can, uh, let me share. Yeah, a tab. Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay, great. Can you see that?
Yes.
Is it, or is it, let me see if I can go into, yeah, there we go. I think that's better. Okay, so and this directly relates to network to code and maybe what you're seeing as a vision. So there's so this graphic is kind of linear on the horizontal. It's kind of years, in 2-year ticks,
Hmm.
and then on the left is model autonomy. All right, and so this basically is in kind of a horizon, length and minutes. Right, so
Okay.
less than a second, 10 seconds, or 10 minutes, 1,000 minutes, 10 to the 5 minutes, and so forth. And this graphic, this red line is a pretty well known organization. It's an open source organization, and what they're basically saying is that these are all observed, points today, and then their projection is that the model autonomy will increase by basically exponentially over the next x number of years. So right now we have the way that this is the way to think about kind of the horizon length is at around 10 to the 2, that's about 100 minutes or so, and that you can some of the models now can do tasks that would take a human about 100 minutes, and they won't fail, or they'll have a 50% chance of actually delivering. As we get into like the 26, 28 time frame, that goes to about 7 days. And then into the 2030 time frame, it's about a month. So like what it would take a human to do in a month, there's a 50% chance that a model will be able to do that same task without failing. And that's the 50%, part of the failing. So then when I map this, and there's a build to this in a second, when I map this to like our industry, which is the part that you're really focused in, what we're doing right now is kind of the initial stages that humans are still very much in the loop in network operations and security operations. Like your Autobot fits right in here, right? It was like
Hmm.
prime time, AI, you can basically use some of these agents to really help and assist, right? But as we move into like the next couple of years, especially like the 27, 28 time frame, that's when agents will start to begin to handle agents, that they'll be able to really kind of look into the infrastructure and deal with incidents, maybe in the microsecond, maybe in the nanosecond time frame. And then the people, the engineers, will start to shift in terms of responsibility. They'll move more towards um, policy and governance, but you still need a very deep domain experience. So I think anything
Hmm.
on this graph is going to show you need domain experience. And then into the 2030 timeframe, which is only 5 years away, we're basically talking about these agents. Could you imagine having, hundreds of agents, like maybe thousands of agents? Each can be doing tasks that would normally take a human about a month. So I think that's really where we start to enter into like we're no longer doing network operations and security operations. We're doing more of an agentic operations, and then people are really now focused on exceptions. That something blows up, and you really need to go in there and fix it, but it's really around policy and governance. Then then there's another graph, and it's this one. So this, so the red graph over here is the meter, projection. That's pretty well known.
Hmm.
Then there's the yellow line, and some are basically, and this is getting a lot of steam right now, saying that this exponential growth in autonomy is not is too, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not aggressive enough that it doesn't factor in parallelism, and the advances that we're actually seeing, and so that actually the graph looks something like this, and it becomes super exponential. And this is really done by a guy named Dave Shapiro. And so what this basically shows is that by the year 2030, the amount of automation that an agent might be able to do is like almost 1900 years worth. So it's just off the scale, off the chart. So so there's this big gap here, right?
Hmm.
And when no one really kind of knows where this is going to end, but I kind of, you guys are right here, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Everybody is right there. No one, no
Right.
one's beyond there, right? With and we'll see what the frontier models kind of look like. But in essence, we're either going to ride this curve or we're going to ride that curve, And so I think I can stop sharing this thing. I just wanted to, kind of, share that, one graphic with you. We can kind of get back to things. So I don't know, like, when you're in the midst of this, stuff, how does those kind of projections either resonate with you or not?
Yeah, yeah. I think again, if we look at like the future, the future of where network automation is, and I always try to stay grounded, right? Stay grounded and be pragmatic with where we are and like the pace at which we've gone and where we can go at an accelerated pace. But look, I think it's what you're sharing is exciting, and in my mind, I'm thinking like dozens of agents calling out even hundreds and saving man months or years of time is insane to think about, and no one really knows what it's going to yield. But I do think about with where we are today, like getting access to the right data,
Hmm.
and how do we document things today around the knowledge, right, in every organization? Because I think every organization, you could argue all the OEMs, all the vendors, right? I'll include us in that mix, right? When you look at it from multi-vendor network automation for the last 11 years,
Right.
and we have an Autobot that's often seen as a single product, and it could do a number of automations today. But if I were to look at everything we've done as an example, not to speculate at what others could do, we full life cycle of services, right? From assessing, planning, designing, doing things like workflow analysis. How do we document processes? How do we optimize processes? How do we write the initial MVP? Every one of those lines or every one of those tasks, right? I would say in the vision that I would articulate, it's an agent of some sort, right? To be able to tap into that
Mm.
knowledge of multi-vendor network automation. Now, when we're building multi-vendor network automation, yeah, it would be great, if we were if it's a Nokia data center or Juniper data center, or if it's SD-WAN provider, to tap into knowledge they have that literally nobody else has, to be able to continue to refine things. So yeah, I think the world in this future is how do we continue to go down this path of agentic and having shared tools to be able to all tap into. But it's going to come into this like specialized nature of like niche IT based tools or OEMs that only have that knowledge, and to be able to each company then has their way to open source or commercialize and so forth. So yeah, I think it's extremely exciting, and for us to figure out now how do we have this world of many agents and interop through these shared tools and so forth. Again, like an MCP, right,
Yeah.
as an example.
Yeah. It's, well, it's like really, it is, it is interesting. You can kind of look at like the march that's going on and the progress, around AI, and all of these companies, they are like just like, pedal to the metal. It's like they really aren't giving much. I'm assuming this is correct from the people that I talk to and what I hear is that they really aren't giving much consideration to other anything other than competing, and advancing, the models. And so that there is no army in the world that's going to be able to stop that. That is
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
progressing, straightforward. But then our industry is very, very messy. Networking and security are very messy, mainly because like you know, we've never really, the only thing we've been able to standardize on is TCP/IP and SNMP. And clearly there's like MPLS and there's other protocols, but we really haven't had much standardization in our industry in a really long, long time, like decades, right? And so we're in compute. You got containers. It's like you have virtual machines. They have many more standard ways in which to do computing. Um, Maybe not so much for storage either, but there's only a few number of like really large storage
Hmm.
companies.
Hmm.
Where our industry is just really messy. Everybody, all the OEMs, as you mentioned. When I think OEM, I think Cisco, I think Juniper,
Yeah.
Arista.
Hmm.
I don't know the other ones. Everyone has in their own network management system, they have different schema. All of the events, all of the logs are all different. The way in which they transport those are all different. So we have these fiefdoms or these silos, and it's hard to kind of crack that unless we just, unless maybe AI gets so smart that it can provide a canonicalization, of all of those different formats into a single one that could be, um, then abstracted up where you can now have access to onto visibility and access and control,
Hmm. Hmm.
orchestration, automation control into all those systems. But I don't know. To me, like the big adoption challenge, you alluded to it, is how do you get access to the data? And the way I process that is that because everybody's data is different, and we don't have a standard format,
Yeah.
standard way to do
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Um, is that is that reasonable? Do you kind of
Yeah,
agree
yeah,
with that?
definitely. Yeah, yeah. Look, in our day to day, right, the focus is multi-vendor network automation, and it is no easy feat, due to some of the one-offs that the different vendors have. But as you were saying that, I was thinking back. It was funny. I was at Ansible Fest probably in 2015, 2016,
Hmm.
and it was a few hundred people in the audience, and I think like the exact question was posed around like vendors aligning. And at the time, this is crazy, but 10 years ago, like making the statement, and Ansible like didn't even exist in networks, right? It was just trying to
Yeah.
foresee a
Right.
little bit. It's
Yeah.
like, no, Ansible could be that API right now,
Hmm.
but you still need to put the work and the effort in to build those multi-vendor playbooks. And now I'm not going to say Ansible continues to do well in the networking domain, but when I look at the few tools that continue, we run into in the enterprise space, if Ansible is one of them and a number of other tools, open source or commercial, it does look like, there is some progress there around like building multi-vendor workflows. But there's no doubt, I do think with the role of AI and the ability to do things like dynamically generate APIs
Hmm.
from one or more API systems, because no matter what, you might end up with a Arista Cloud Vision, DNA Center, ACI. There's going to be multi-controller environments where I think we've made progress probably on the those environments who don't want to use controllers, right? For whatever, for maybe
Hmm.
preventing some locking and other reasons you might have. But on the controller front, yeah, I think some of those northbound systems to integrate them and to create unified ways of interoperating. Yeah, I suspect AI and different agents, right? In terms of like really understanding what a single OEM or controller API could do, to potentially publish a newer API that then is published via an agent or MCP to a whatever interface makes sense for a given environment. So I think it's going to be tiered in nature, but I do think AI will help with more uniformity in the networking space, right, as we continue to evolve. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's kind of it's agentic with MCP. Leveraging the MCP protocol to access various different tools that allow that canonicalization, or access into
Yeah.
these different systems
Yeah.
happen. That maybe that's the evolution that we'll see.
Yeah, given where we are, like that I don't want to call it, the obvious starting point, but given, if there's three, four, or five, or a dozen network management or tools that touch a device or touch a controller, I think given how well, documented some of those APIs are in the context that can be provided, and there might need to be some context provided by end users with how that standardization, may happen for a given environment. And that's the part, given where we've been in the last 20 years, there's, snowflakes, that exist out there, and
Mhm.
different ways how enterprises want to consume or define their standards. And I think to be able to rationalize that through standard APIs, I think makes sense. And I think ultimately, we end up with the growth of API gateways and different things like that with an enterprise around governance and so forth to really make sure that there's tight controls in that space. But
Yeah.
yeah, I suspect we'll be in a better spot year over year, right, over the next several years.
It'll be interesting. That there's the thinking is that kind of the progression of AI will be so great that it'll open up all these new kind of opportunities where it's just impossible. It has been impossible, before. So hope that that's the case. So maybe if we veer off a little bit, and that is, there's been lots of discussion about how networking traffic patterns are changing. They're becoming much more unpredictable, much more Brownian motion, because of both those who are experimenting with agentic now, and also those who are kind of using AI tools that are in the cloud. So like the whole
Hmm.
cloud back into like the enterprise, piece. Have you seen, any difference on how applications are behaving when they're kind of more AI workloads versus kind of our more traditional, deterministic kind of applications?
Hmm. Yeah, I guess what I would point out here is, and maybe we can circle back and continue to dive into like the AI for networks. But I think Jay Shree might have said this last year or something. But the networks for AI versus AI for networks. With your question, really about the fabrics, right? The Cisco, the Aristas, and the OEMs of building out networks for AI.
Mm.
When in discussions that I've had, largely a lot of this is, I do think in the cloud, probably haven't seen as much in the enterprise space yet. I feel like over the next couple of years we'll
Oh,
see more of that. But I think what we will foresee is a little bit what we're both alluding to with MCP being deployed. And if you were to look at even an example of like Chat GPT as an agent communicating with multiple MCPs, to kind of bring the example to life is you might have one prompt that goes in kept at a high level. What's the health of a given device or a location or an application? In order to
yeah,
really understand the health, like that one prompt might communicate to a dozen different tools, and there might be 10, 5 to 10 or more API calls per tool. So one prompt might yield 100 different API calls. So well, I think we're gonna see the bursty, the spiky traffic, the increase in east west. As I think about it, I do think about the past 10, 15, 20 years of the big data, the Hadoop, the microservices, and so forth.
yeah.
But so I think there's some similarity there. But I was saying a little bit earlier on the API gateways. I do think some of the change is going to be around like the growth of API consumption by
Hmm.
some of these agents that
Yeah.
that exist. And looking at you might have a network management system or any other system that is just getting hammered from their APIs, And so I think in general, like the application architectures, and I don't even mean the AI applications, like the applications that are getting read. How do we have things like
Yeah.
maybe read only replicas and proxies and just ensuring security compliance for them. But yeah, no, I think we're going to see the continued burstiness and so forth of the a lot of the east-west traffic that literally from a single question or a prompt can have any number of API calls going across a data center or to a cloud system for that matter.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because I wasn't thinking about that. So that's like how an operator,
Hmm.
contributes to the traffic. It's
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
I was thinking it more from the point of view is that you have a developer and they're kind of leveraging Gemini, and so you
I
have
see.
kind of
Hmm.
all these API calls like kind of going back and forth,
Right.
all the time, and that's the applications talking to applications, or the agents talking to like applications and tools that are now, not in your solvent domain, but now they're stretched across two solvent domains. Maybe multiple solvent domains. But I think it's the same dynamic, but it's just different use cases that maybe we're thinking of. You're thinking, and actually, it's a really great case because I didn't really think about it. Is that you have an operator checking on the health of some device, or maybe wants to do kind of some trace. You send out a prompt, with an AI tool, and then boom, it starts to like run a whole bunch of different processes that drive kind of a ton of API calls across the network. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Exactly.
really interesting. I wasn't even thinking about that, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think about that even beyond health when you think about all the different verticals and I think exposing natural language chat interfaces to every different persona in a vertical, and it could be a student in a higher ed organization to a help desk in enterprise or a user in the enterprise space. So I think like just really thinking through the exposure, who gets access to these interfaces, and then what tools and systems they can communicate with. Because I think at scale, the amount of API calls that we're going to see within an IT environment, is going to drastically increase. And then start small, if it's for engineering and developers, and go up. But I think there's a lot of requests that we see from executives, understanding health in more of a natural language, even procurement, right? We spend a lot of time in our data and lifecycle management. How can procurement get better access to support contracts and things like that who might be spread across ServiceNow or different systems of record and so forth. And so,
Yeah.
the more people that you expose the data to, it's just really ensuring there's tight controls and even the ability to kind of monitor that right over time, so you can kind of continue to reinforce the right governance and controls and quality of service right for the applications themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So then let's talk about maybe kind of adoption, challenges at scale. So I know we talked about data, as being, one of the problems with scale. People, as well, kind of a new set of toolkits that are
Hmm.
coming in. But are you seeing other kinds of challenges, to try to scale kind of automation, across, yeah, I'm not sure we can kind of pick like a really large company like a Bank of America, which is like just
Hmm.
massive. They would be like the fifth largest service provider, if they were in the telecom space,
Right.
or we can go something much smaller. I don't know what's kind of what's your sense that where are we hitting up against the wall in scale around automation?
Yeah, with scale for enterprise network automation, I typically break it down to three areas, and we've touched upon two of them already. And I'll kind of call them out, and I'll add a fourth, and the large financials probably fit in well here. But I look at like skills, culture, data, and then we can kind of go. We talked about data a little bit. I think even
Mm,
like the notion of intended state has grown in the last couple of years. I will say skills and culture we can kind of hit on, but when you kind of call out some of the larger Fortune 100, even large financials. I do think like there's, if there's ever been, I would say in the community, maybe a myth that, things are just plug and play. And
Yeah.
it takes time. And I would say with the experience that we have, even in this, like the Fortune 100 space, like the truth is like there's so many different applications that are homegrown in the financials that they want to integrate to their automation systems.
Yeah.
And so, that might mean custom data sources that aren't going to go away. Some get consolidated, some don't. There might be, some custom automation tools. There might be commercial automation tools. And to really, build the cohesive platform, like the myth isn't there that it happens overnight. In terms of when you look at like build, do you build it? Do you buy it? Do you use open source and customize it? I think it takes time. And I
Mm.
think getting for the large guys, yeah, I would probably recognizing that there's going to be bespoke implementations needed, and I think for the larger organizations, making sure there is just a way to extend a platform or customize a platform to their liking, because like there's decades and decades of culture, right, in these
Mm.
large organizations,
Yeah.
and it is hard if a tool tries to change culture, but words have to be the right words in a UI for users to understand like what those things are. And so, it takes a lot of care and feeding to be able to look at everything from a naming convention, data governance, right, to get all of these things right to be able to help them on their journey. But culture, I think coupled with culture, and in these large organizations, we've seen a mix of being brought in from engineers are brought in, and maybe it's mixed at the top, or vice versa, where there's executive buy-in, and engineers are a bit more arms crossed, a little resistant. And if there's not if
Hmm.
there's not buy-in at every step along the way, from the engineer to the MD and so forth, like it becomes a little bit
Yeah.
more of a struggle. There's got to be a champion like every step of the way, really to
Yeah.
really make the.
I wonder if like there is a large group of our population in our industry that's aging out on the culture side of things. And I wonder if that's you know as more age out, um, the more open the culture is going to be to automating.
Mhm,
you
mhm.
know,
Yeah,
because it's
even
like
looking at the processes. Yeah, yeah. Some of the processes were built 20 years ago, and now when you're looking at how
yeah.
do you adopt processes, and I think as people age out or maybe retire and move on, yeah, I think with the age of automation and AI and GitOps, there's a breath of fresh air to come in and rethink things.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, frankly, I think that's a big drag on the culture, on its ability to actually move and adopt. It's that I've seen it in my entire career. You have folks who have been in a position for more than 5 years. Sometimes it's 20 years or so, and it's like um, they kind of know that they have the keys to the kingdom, and
Hmm.
they don't want to give those keys away. It's like they don't want to learn new things. They think everything's just fine, and don't upset the apple cart. Is kind of it. And so I think there is a changing of the guard. That will naturally occur. So that would take care of one third of the problem, and that's kind of a natural kind of progression, right? And then you still
Yeah.
have the data,
Hmm.
piece. So you have and then the skills that might also take care of the skills piece too, because you have new
It's
people
true.
coming in with new skills.
It's
I think we
true.
just gotta
It's
wait,
true. Yeah. You know
Jason.
what?
I think that's it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then yeah, exactly. Then you look at some of what the AI agents are going to do over the next 3 to 5 years to help with some of these tasks. But even on skills, I wouldn't mind spending a minute on skills because,
Yeah.
oftentimes we kind of talk about some of the technologies, if it's Python or something, and it could be Go or answer doesn't really matter. And then you get insertive, like if you're buying a tool, if it's commercial, is there still uh, a need, right, for the skills investment? I would just say, like, on my side, to me, it's like a short answer of yes, because no matter if you're building or buying or downloading or whatever's happening in this day and age, right? Every system has an API, right? How do you get
Yeah.
data in? How do you get data out? How do you run an automation from a third party system? How do you integrate ticketing systems? And so almost everything today, REST API, GraphQL, Python APIs, developer APIs. And so, and as soon as you build that integration, it's got to go somewhere, right? It's likely in Git. If I was a betting man, it's version somewhere, and then it kind
Yeah.
of goes, this snowball effect of like learning those skills to be able to appropriately manage that. And it's possible without some of these things, and you kind of get into like the pockets of teams like not communicating and not collaborating. But yeah, I just like to make the point that even if there's commercial platforms getting used, like there's still that area of skills investment, everything from technology and even breaking down processes. Like even the people that we were just talking about maybe aging
Mhm.
out, I think there's such an opportunity for the people that have been there for the last 10 or 20 years to document the current processes, like document
Mm.
the risks. All of that knowledge is what AI is going to need to really be successful, to be part of the solution, right? And to really, some of those nuanced, those scar wounds from years past. Hopefully, there's tickets we'll learn from, right, in the LLMs and SLMs, within enterprise spaces. But I think getting the guys, the engineers that don't even have some of the automation skills to be able to get more and more of that thought and the knowledge on paper is gonna continue to make AI even more exciting, right, over the next
Yeah.
5 to 10 years.
That's a good point, and we're going to have to do it soon because I want to share another graph, with you. And let's see if I can do this. Okay. All right. Can you see this one?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we did a poll. This is also like for the opening, so I'm kind of sharing. Kind of. I hope we don't publish this until after the conference. But the question, okay, are you reducing or capping infrastructure skilled staff and investing in AI to make up the difference? Like, check out that result. Almost 40%, yeah, big time. 31%, yeah, and then 20%, not yet, but it's coming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know yeah, so I think it's like in order to kind of document that processes, we better get that going pretty quick you know
Yeah. Yeah, so I was saying earlier, kind of joking, 11 years network automation. I always joke I was young and naive 11 years ago, didn't have any grays, and thought things were going to change like really, really quick. And a lot of discussions around Python for network engineers and so forth, and what's going to happen in the future. But I will say, like the rate of change now is growing, and like the rate is
yeah,
happening faster. I think it took 11 years to really become, I would say, at an industry level conversational, Python, Ansible, APIs, and so forth. And yeah, like, my guess is over the next five and half the amount of time, we'll probably see 2 or 3x the pace, or more, the pace of innovation, right? Given what we've just seen in the past 2 years with AI. And
yeah.
so, a little bit scary. We all don't know, what's to come. But yeah, trying to embrace it is really the only way,
It's the
right? To
only
continue.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no doubt. It's the only way. And I think, yeah, there is something to it. It's like if I go back to like, that graphic, like I know like there's a bunch of board members that they're they've been offering, the companies have been offering early retirement. Um, and a lot are taking it. A lot of their staff are taking it, and they are told that you can't, refill that rec. You got to use kind of automation. You have to use AI, to make up that difference. Walmart's CEO just announced like this week, they have 2.8 million people that work at Walmart. It's like the largest private employer, and they're projected to grow 4% per year over the next couple of years. And they're basically saying we're not going to like go past. There'll be changes, in terms of employment, but they're not adding. It's like they're keeping that capped.
Hmm.
2.8. And so I think for companies like Network to Code and others, it's like that now is becoming kind of the line item. It's okay. There is money there. There used to be salaries, but now they're in essence like either capex or opex, to help make the existing employee pool a lot more productive, and that's
Right.
clearly what you've been working on for for a long time. So it looks like
Yeah. Yeah.
no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, just as we talk about network automation and the role of AI in it, even trying to get the message out of leveraging more tools for non-automation tasks where they might not always come up. It could be things like postmortems, right, or helping with documentation, things like that. So it's just
Mm,
the access to different LLMs within enterprise spaces continue to grow, and so trying to make sure that as we share with the community, right, from the podcast to other presentations, that there's so many other day-to-day use cases where if it's getting AI embedded in ServiceNow or Jira or Confluence and so forth, but looking at like every task that an engineer does that's not just doing a deployment is really challenging ourselves and to ask how can we leverage AI to perform that, right, and to be a little bit more productive and a little bit more efficient, right, with our time.
yeah, yeah. All right. Um, you want to give like a 2-year view? What do you think? Is what would be kind of like the big kind of events that you're kind of looking for? That we've been on a. It's not a linear. It had to be
Hmm.
kind of linear for the first 7 years. Like I think these last 3 years, it's been really just kind of the uptick is there. Um, but I don't know, is there anything that you're looking for to say, okay, yeah, the market is like really ready to kind of automate this, that it's not as hard maybe as it used to be, and that we can, actually make a lot more progress faster.
Yeah, if I look at like the past, like I said, like the past decade or so, it took a while to get here, and so like the rate of change hasn't been as fast as like I said, I would have expected a decade ago. But when I see what's happening now and trying to have some corollaries to the last 10 years, I think we're going to continue right now to see like the innovators, some of the DIYers, maybe a little bit of open source when we look at the MCP servers and some of the initial agentic frameworks that emerged. But if I were looking at like 2 to 3 years, some of what we've seen now, yeah, I really think your chart probably said it well. Are we totally out of human in the loop? No, I don't think so. But I think we have pretty well structured frameworks to be able to look at data or take a directive to say we need to do better here. We need to have better compliance. We have our annual audit. We're always failing. We have the general description. We have the outcome in mind, and then we're able to leverage AI to build out like the systematic approach to how we're going to go build the automation with AI, how we're going to
Mm,
build guardrails with AI, the automated tests with AI, the checks with AI, and having humans at every step along the way to continue to make edits, refine, and change. So that way, again, more AI continues to monitor those edits. So that way, when we're in call it years 3, 4, and 5, the human in the loop, like if we were to plot that on an XY axis, yeah, human in the loop is really down and to the right as we look at the next several years. But I think like that to me is sort of like the vision of what I would see in the next couple of years is the growth of these specific agents that allow us to really have, I would say, network automation powered by AI with human in the loop over the next 2 to 3 years, and
yeah.
then eventually pulling back on the human element as we gain more trust, And yeah, it starts today. It starts with data.
Yeah.
Get the data right. Get even automations right today, because the agents can take advantage of those trusted automations that humans already built.
Great point. Super great point. And nice projection, as well, Jason. I think why don't we leave it at that? I think that was kind of a nice way to kind of like wrap up, the discussion and give everyone a mental model as to like how this industry is going to progress. So I want to just thank you so much for like taking the time and and sharing your thought leadership with everyone and being such a leader in the community as well. Like Network to Code is you guys are one of my favorite companies to work with. It's like you're always you always bring a great group. I think we're really aligned on the importance of community, and I think that really kind of shows. So thanks so much, Jason.
All right. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you everyone for plugging in as well. Thank you.